So good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Indo-Dutch Chamber for Business and Sciences, I welcome you very much to this afternoon session, which is on Netherlands as the gateway to Europe. I'm very privileged to have the ambassador Martin Vandenberg here, and he will be presiding over this today's discussions, of course. And also alongside, I'm also very pleased that we have a very leading law firm from Netherlands called Loyens Loeff, which is also represented here and participating actively, speaking in this session today. Besides the Netherlands NFIA, as we call it, which is the International Agency for Foreign Investment. So I think we welcome all of you participants as well in today afternoon. And without much ado, I think you all know about IDCBS. We all have members here, and the speakers would also know us. So we try to facilitate such dialogues which are to the benefit of both the countries, or at least one of them. So may I, with these words, welcome Ambassador Martin Vandenberg to please address the gathering.
Thank you so much, Rajesh, and it's really a pleasure and an honor to participate in this session. Also because it's actually or basically about openness, about foreign investment, and that is very, very close to my heart. And if you take a snapshot of the Netherlands, you will see a very, very open society and a very open economy. So the Netherlands, I think, is an excellent location for a gateway to Europe. But just let me give you some brief observations from my side on the openness of the Netherlands economy. First of all, if you look just to figures, statistics, indicators, you will find out the Netherlands is the most globalized economy in the world, with all its connections in so many dimensions, which I think, and we have to be honest, we very much benefit from it. So it's, I think, a strength of our society and our economy. Secondly, I think very much that openness is in our DNA. We are so internationalization in our society, in our economy, in our trade investment relations is just everywhere. And you can feel it, I think you can smell it, and I think it's a big asset of our society. And if you take a snapshot from certain details of that openness, of course, if you look to our infrastructure with the Port of Rotterdam, the most efficient, the biggest of Europe, most efficient in the world. If you look to Schiphol, it all connects our roads, our river system, it very much connects the Netherlands with the world and the Netherlands with the rest of Europe. And also lots of people say, for example, Rotterdam is not only the harbor for the Netherlands, but very much the harbor for North and Western Europe. If you look to the importance of foreign companies to the Dutch society and the Dutch economy, that is substantial. A lot of employment is with foreign companies in the Netherlands. And you see a huge presence of foreign companies from all over the world in the Netherlands, and it's very much increasing. Also, the connection of those companies, of those institutions with global systems, global R&D systems is very, very visible and very much there. And I find myself also, if you, for example, visit a high-tech campus in Eindhoven, it's very, very inspirational what you can see, that so many international R&Ds, international researchers working together on so many different kind of innovations. And I think it's really a great place to be. But also, if you look to our policies, and we will have more presentations on this, for example, in trade policies, investment policies, tax policies, our policies are very much open-minded and very much focused on the connection of the Netherlands with the rest of the world. Of course, if you go back in our history, we started with trade already hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and you will see Dutch trade posts all over the world. Whether you go to Brazil, to India, to Korea, to Japan, Indonesia, Africa, all over the world, you will see Dutch trading posts from the past. To see if you meet our people, I think openness is in there, as I said, DNA. English, everyone speaks English at universities, at companies, on the street, in buses. I think it's a very open society. And also, if you walk around in cities, in streets, our daily lives with restaurants, international food, culture, there also see a lot of dimensions of our internationalization, of our globalization being there in our society. So I think, yes, the Netherlands is a perfect country for FDI, a perfect country to connect you with the rest of Europe, to be the gateway for Europe. But ultimately, of course, the proof of the pudding is in eating. And I think the best proof is that you see so many foreign companies being based in the Netherlands for such a long time. So many international universities, institutions have bases in the Netherlands for such a long time. I think that's the ultimate proof of openness of our society and our economy. So we very much welcome foreign investors coming over to the Netherlands. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Obviously, Netherlands for sure, no doubt about it, that's a gateway to Europe. And having seen it over the last so many years myself, 24 years actually speaking, I think I have just no doubt about it. So I think those of you or those of us who haven't been able to exploit that or leverage that facility in Netherlands, I think should do it post haste. With these words, may I now welcome Arno Besseling, who's the Executive Director of Netherlands Foreign Investment Agency. And he's from Rotterdam, which truly is the gateway. Within Netherlands is the gateway, actually speaking. So he has been in India since 2019. Before that, Republic of South Korea. He's been advisor to the mayor of Rotterdam. He was deeply connected with getting foreign investments into the port of Rotterdam, which by far is one of the most advanced ports in the world. And he has graduated studied in different universities in Netherlands, truly hands-on, absolutely into foreign investments. So may I welcome him to make a presentation, and he can talk about the trade, the foreign flows, and otherwise whatever is attractive to the Netherlands. Arno, please.
Thank you, Rajesh, for your kind introduction. It's always nice to hear something about yourself, I must say. Thank you, Ambassador, also. It's always a risk to speak after Martin because he's the ambassador, so he knows exactly what I'm going to say, of course. I want to tell something about our organization today and give you some insight in the reasons why companies choose to invest in the Netherlands. As mentioned, I've been doing this for a long time already. First from Korea, now from India, and I must say I'm fascinated by the entrepreneurial spirit that I see here, the drive to go international. And you know, we Dutch are open, have an open economy, but I think India, especially from the business side, is opening up very rapidly at the moment. I'm going to start my slideshow. I have a couple of slides to share today. Let me see if that works. It's always a challenge, right? Well, I'm getting handy in it. I've been doing this now for 2 years, so I'm glad it works. So my name is Arno Besseling. I'm the director for the Netherlands Foreign Investment Agency. We are a 40-year-old organization, part of the Ministry of Economic Affairs and part of the Trade Network India. And the Trade Network India is the embassy in Delhi, our CGs in Mumbai and Bangalore, and our honorary consuls and Netherlands NBSOs offices all over India. So we have a broad network in India. Our offices are located in Delhi, Mumbai, and Bangalore. And I'm located in the beautiful city of Mumbai. If you look at this picture, you see The Hague. So you see the little tower in the middle. That's the work office of our Prime Minister. He's at the moment working hard to form a new government or cabinet, as we mention it. For those who are not familiar with the Netherlands, we have a huge amount of heritage buildings. This is the city of The Hague, where you can see a wonderful mix between the old but also the new. And that's what the Netherlands is all about. As mentioned, I work for the Netherlands Foreign Investment Agency. Really, in a nutshell, what we do is we help Indian companies establish themselves in the Netherlands and create jobs. We've been doing that now for over 14 years in India, and I must say quite successful. At the moment, we have over 300 Indian entities in the Netherlands, and that puts us in almost second position after the UK, which has a natural link with India, but also Germany, where of course the manufacturing industry is leading in Europe. But we cannot complain. We are doing really well. Every year we do around between 15 and 20 successful projects with Indian companies. And we help them in many ways. So first of all, we try to find them, try to make them interested in our country, tell them about our country. We give them all sorts of information. Why should you go to the Netherlands? We help them with their business cases. We help them to find partners, but also service providers, like, for example, Loyens Loeff. We inform them about labor laws, how to apply for visas, work permits, etc. We really try to be hands-on with our operation. And eventually this would lead to a company visiting the Netherlands. We call that the fact-finding. And we organize the fact-finding, make it as easy as possible, make sure that the company is really informed before they make a decision to invest. We're really, we are very realistic. If a company doesn't fit the Netherlands, that's also good. But we try to do everything possible to make sure that the company is making a solid decision. What we do is confidential, of course, and free of charge. We are part of the Netherlands government, so we cannot charge fees for that. Loyens Loeff will do, but we won't. We're not doing this alone. So our organization is if you compare us to, for example, UKTI or Invest in North Rhine-Westfalen, we have as an NFIA, we have the national focus. For us, the Netherlands is one, but within the Netherlands, of course, you have different provinces. All these provinces have regional development agencies, and it's sort of their work is similar to our work. So as soon as we have a company from India visiting the Netherlands, we will make connections to our partner organizations, and they will guide the company further. You can imagine that cities like Rotterdam, Amsterdam have their own ecosystems, their own dynamics, of which they would like to share to the companies, and it is a very proven method of attracting investments. It really makes sure that the companies that are locating themselves in the Netherlands get connected to all the right ecosystems and can do business basically straight away. So what are we looking for? We're not helping any company nowadays. The Netherlands is doing really well. You can imagine that with a 2% unemployment rate, we cannot help any company. So we made a decision to work with the somewhat smaller, middle-size, large companies in India. So companies that have, for example, 100 employees in India. That's a little bit the threshold we are looking for. We are in the business of creating jobs in the Netherlands, high-end jobs preferably. So companies should invest a certain amount of money, but also should be able to create jobs in the Netherlands, and there's create a minimum job creation of 5 to 10 people. That's our minimum requirement. We look for companies in the life sciences, agri-food, information technology. So information technology from India, that's a no-brainer. I think we do. I think 95% of all the projects that we do are information technology related. But of course, chemicals, high-tech systems, and sustainable energy. So we really have a focus on those companies that we would like to have in the Netherlands, that of whom we think can enhance our ecosystems and prepare the Netherlands for the future. We look for those companies that can assist in solving problems, societal problems, in, for example, digitalization, sustainability. Those type of companies we're looking for. So why would you go to the Netherlands? I think a lot of said. We are strategic location at the heart of Europe. We are considered to be the gateway into Europe due to the port of Rotterdam, but also Schiphol Airport. Look at Schiphol Airport, direct flights from Mumbai, direct flights from Delhi. Via Air France, you can fly from Bangalore. So there's it's a well-connected country. From Schiphol Airport, you can reach any city in Europe quite easily. But not only by plane, trains, roads are well developed. So it's a well-connected country. We have a superior logistics and technology infrastructure. Internet-wise, the Netherlands is the gateway because one of the transatlantic cables out of the US is entering via the North Sea into Amsterdam. That's one of the reasons why there's almost no latency when it comes to internet connections. It's that's the reason why a lot of Fortune 500 companies are located in the Amsterdam region. We're competitive when you look at fiscalities. You do have to pay taxes in the Netherlands. Probably Barbara will tell something about that. But we are competitive when you compare us to our surrounding partners. Highly skilled, multi-language workforce. You will notice that a lot of Dutch people speak proper English. I think one of the reasons why a lot of Indian companies choose, for example, the UK is because they have no language barrier. I can assure you that in the Netherlands you will have almost the same level of English proficiency compared to the UK. We're stable. Government took a little bit longer this time to have a new government, but it's there. It's stable, and the Netherlands is competitive as a country, economically competitive, but also innovation. The Netherlands has an entrepreneurial spirit that I also see in India, but you can also see that in our country. Well, this is a testimonial. I can tell you anything, of course, but it's more realistic to hear it from somebody else. This is Netflix. Netflix has located itself in Amsterdam, and Amsterdam is really the place for attracting people, staff from all over the world. We attract the brains from all over, and what they really value is the international atmosphere, the openness of the Dutch people, openness of the business climate, but also the lifestyle. I think a lot of Indians that move to the Netherlands can recognize the life-work balance. It's highly developed in the Netherlands, and most Indians that I speak that worked in the Netherlands and moved back to India, they miss it and they want to go back as soon as possible. Another one, Google. Basically, it speaks for itself. So I will make sure this presentation gets also to the listeners today. I talk to over 150 companies a year. As mentioned, we have already 300 companies. So our organization is also keeping contact to those companies and asking them how are things going. And it's not a thing to only attract, but we also maintain contact and facilitate growth for those companies. Again, highly educated workforce. Reliable infrastructure, open, positive attitude of the Dutch society as a whole. and in general just business friendly. Setting up a company in the Netherlands takes roughly a week. Getting a bank account takes a little bit longer and needs a little bit study, but our organization can help you with all those steps that you need to take to be able to do business in the Netherlands. Highly competitive. We are a small country. And on top is Switzerland. Maybe small countries can easily be more competitive. I don't know, but the Netherlands is doing really great in all the research that is being done about competitiveness from the IMD, INSEAD, UNDP. It speaks for itself. We're in a nice list with Switzerland, Sweden, Denmark, so small countries, Nordic countries, but also the US on top number 5. I think this is a good list to take a look at. We are innovative. If you compare us to the rest of the world, the Netherlands has. Let me rephrase it. The Netherlands has a focused policy on innovation. So when you come to the Netherlands, it's never only businesses, it's never only government. It's a triple helix that we try to use in the Netherlands. So that basically means government is involved in innovation together with companies, research, and the educational institutes. So it's a three-party thing, and innovation is being taught to children from a young age already. And you see more and more Dutch companies like Adyen, Molly to become unicorns and do really well. It's an environment where those sort of companies or companies that are entrepreneurial and want to grow, they do grow, but they don't do it alone. So they can make use of government and educational institutions. Again, a chart to reiterate what I was just saying. Companies thrive in the Netherlands. You know, we are small again if you compare us to the US, but we punch straight pretty much beyond our size and weight. This is already mentioned, of course. Just to round it up a little bit, it's an open environment. It's a business-friendly climate, politics, economic. Everything is stable. We're in the heartland of Europe, and you know, you're in reach with 95% of the consumers in Europe, which is. Well, as you can see, over 244 million consumers. What you see is a lot of Indian companies are using the Netherlands as a stepping board. The Netherlands is small, so it's really attractive to try out new products. Dutch companies are always willing to innovate, as mentioned. So it's really a sort of small size laboratory where you can try out your products, and from there you can move throughout of Europe, and that's I think Barbara will tell you something about how you can use the Netherlands as your European hub for your business. Again, we are here to help. We are willing to roll out the orange carpet, as we say it. Please reach out to us if you have the ambition to go to Europe or thinking about expanding to the Netherlands. We will try to make it as easy as possible for you. So that's it from my side, Rajesh.
Thank you, Arno. Very informative, I must say. A number of things which, of course, are well known. A number of things were not so well known, which came from you. So I think it's all really enriching for all the participants. About the fascination part for India from you, the feeling is mutual. So most of us are fascinated with Netherlands as well. So that goes hand in hand. The other thing is that you mentioned about the openness of the society there, which is true. But one admirable thing in Netherlands is, but where we lack actually here, is also the self-regulation. So I think people also very controlled, very well voluntarily regulate themselves, which is wonderful. And the third thing is that in another way, Netherlands stands tall, no pun intended, is also because people are very straightforward. There's no beating around the bush, straight talk, and very, very, crisp and precise, which is wonderful. So thank you again very much. And with these words, may I invite now Barbara Voskamp to please come on and address us. Before she comes, a quick word of introduction. She's a partner ASEAN in Loyens Loeff and head of Singapore office. As she said, that she's been in Singapore so long that she's almost a Singaporean as well. So besides those of you who don't know, Loyens Loeff is a very well regarded and large international law firm out of Rotterdam, with offices in Switzerland, Belgium, and other major financial hubs. My sense, I read that you have something like 800 plus lawyers and tax advisors within the group. That's quite a number. And you yourself, I read that specialize in international taxation, cross-border advices, and besides all of that, you enjoy lecturing in the SMU, Singapore Management University. Yeah. And I think Barbara also sits on various boards and committees. One which stands out is being a member of the executive board of the International Fiscal Association, and that's quite a landmark. So thank you, Barbara. The floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Rajesh. I need to add one thing to your kind introduction, and that is for my Amsterdam colleagues that we have big offices in Rotterdam and in Amsterdam. As you know, for the Dutchies, there's always like this ongoing battle between Amsterdam and Rotterdam. So we have a big office in Amsterdam and we have a big office in Rotterdam, and they're equally important, but you're absolutely right. I mean, we are incorporated in Rotterdam, so that is our statutory seat. For us, 2021 was an important year, not only because we were being creative, working with COVID and non-traveling. We covered a region from Singapore, but also because we celebrated our 100-year anniversary in Asia. We've been in the region for 100 years. We have offices here in Hong Kong and in Tokyo. And over the years, we have assisted a zillion companies with the structuring of their investments into Europe. So we've quite some track record and experience there. I haven't been here for 100 years, but I've been here quite some time, a good 16 years, working with companies in the region, advising them on how to set up their investments into Europe. For today, I'm going to step a little bit out of my comfort zone. As you rightfully point out, my background is international tax. I'm going to give you some high-level overview on legal and tax considerations, because I mean, for investment decisions, I mean, in the past, I mean, probably there was more tax drivers to it. I mean, with all international tax developments, it's becoming more in balance, and legal drivers and other drivers are increasingly important. So let's take a look at the main 4 drivers actually when deciding on where to set up your venture overseas. It's basically very easy. It's always the same 4. It's connectivity, it's legal ecosystem, it's tax climate, and access to talent. And we'll dive into the 4 of them and take a look at the legal and tax aspects of that. If you look at connectivity, it's always good to zoom a bit in on Europe or the EU. I mean, the terms are frequently used, loosely used, but looking at Europe, I mean, that's obviously the continent. You have the European Union, which is not, for example, Switzerland, Norway. And then you have the Eurozone, which is 19 countries out of the EU. When talking about where setting up, I mean, this is always a very important driver, because it seems so unimportant, but being able to use like one currency throughout your operations in Europe is quite useful. EU, 21 member states before Brexit. As you all know, we're now down to 27. What is good to know is that within the corporate law space, there's quite some harmonization within the EU, and that goes from accounting to VAT, to data protection, to privacy, to anti-money laundering, to competition. And the other thing that is good to realize is that 9 out of 10, there's an EU directive or EU framework. And that means that each and every member state needs to implement that in their domestic laws. That is, it is a guidance of a European Union towards the various member states. And typically there's a minimum standard. And so member states have the freedom to implement that, provided that they observe the minimum standard. So if and when you look at European law, you always need to make sure that you check like the domestic implication in that particular jurisdiction. So when using one of the member states to have access to the whole of the EU, that is good to realize that you still have like 28 different tax systems. But there's quite some harmonization of withholding tax exemptions. There's quite some harmonizing of anti-tax avoidance measures. Still, each and every jurisdiction has its own tax treaties. And well, there's a huge variety in different smaller taxes, but I won't bother you with that at this point. Well, as Arnoud and Ambassador have already pointed out, the other point where it comes to connectivity is not so much legal, is very practical, but when it comes to deciding on where to set up, 9 out of 10, it turns out that, the practicalities are far more important than the legal framework, although some or most of my legal colleagues tend to disagree on that one. But I fully agree that the business, the legal considerations follow the business and the practical considerations. So much for connectivity. Legal ecosystem. If you look at the Netherlands as part of the EU, why the Netherlands is often chosen as an entry point into the EU is because it has a flexible corporate law. You have your entitlement to EU directives and treaties. And it's a central location, it's political stable, but also, there's a business-friendly regime founded on the rule of law, which coming from, this side of the world, is not per se a given. The other thing is, more and more you see that overseas governments and tax authorities are increasingly reluctant vis-a-vis offshore jurisdictions, vis-a-vis smaller jurisdictions that may not have the same status as reputable jurisdictions as the Netherlands. Let me name, for example, Monaco or Liechtenstein. Those definitely won't pass a smell test anymore. The Netherlands is seen as a reputable jurisdiction, but still with a fairly favorable tax regime. As I said, it's widely recognized as a reliable and reputable jurisdiction. So whilst it's not compulsory to set up a entity in the Netherlands, when you start up your business, you see that most companies do so. That is a 9 out of 10 because limitation of liability, but also to ensure continuity. It's easier to transfer. You have access to certain tax benefits, and there's a transferability element. When setting up a NV or BV, this is as Arnoud mentioned already, that is pretty straightforward. In the old days, it took like easily 2-3 weeks. Nowadays, once we have all the documents, we can incorporate the company within 2-3 days. It is still executed by a notarial deed. And so you always need like a civil law notary. Interestingly enough, we're super international, but the official language of the articles is still in Dutch, although we standard provide the English translation. The paid up capital used to be higher amount. Nowadays is 1 cent. What typically takes the longest is the opening of a bank account. And as Arnoud said and mentioned, this is something that falls sort of within the orange carpet, right, Arnoud?
Yes, Barbara. I think when a company is being assisted by us, we can provide the company. They have to provide us with documentation, but we can provide them with a letter of contact, which makes it easier to apply for a bank account. I say easier, but as you mentioned, it is quite difficult, and banks are quite strict at the moment. But in general, all the companies we help, eventually they will get a bank account. And if not, there are financial technology options also available.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah, and nowadays, especially with the in-persona identification, it may be complicated, but even for that, there's like COVID-proof 2021 solutions designed. The other thing that is good to notice, I mean, in India, you have a common law system. The Netherlands is a civil law system. I'm sure you know, civil law is mostly codification of public and private law. We have quite some mandatory provisions in our civil codes. What does that mean? That even though you have like quite some freedom of contract, if there's certain provisions that are mandatory by nature, those will override the terms of your contract. So for example, if you include in your employment contract a probation period of a year, I mean, under Dutch law, there's a maximum number of months, so that will be overwritten by the mandatory provisions in the Dutch laws. So very good to have that on your radar if and when you are setting up and entering into contracts, that there's not just the terms of the contract, but on top of that, there's mandatory and semi-mandatory provisions that need to be observed. Here's a quick overview of what the difference is. I mean, we'll circulate the slide so that you can do some bedtime reading. The other thing that is relevant in the legal ecosystem is that you can actually choose your law and jurisdiction. So you can also opt for Indian law in your contracts. You have a question there, Rajesh?
No, I don't have a question. Somebody raised an issue that if you can make it full screen slide, it'll be more readable.
I can't.
You can't.
I tried, but
okay.
Yeah, sorry.
So Marcel, I can't help you. Please carry on.
Sorry. Yeah, I tried, but this is probably just me. Sorry. I'll circulate that so that you can study them afterwards. I'll try to read out more of what is on the slide so that you don't need to zoom in. Yeah, so if you have the choice of law, so you can opt for different law in your contract, and you can actually choose for the Netherlands for arbitration, for example, for international commercial matters, the Netherlands Commercial Court, or for international arbitration in any of the other international arbitration hubs, which might be useful if you're entering, for example, in a joint venture and you don't want to be you don't want to surrender to Dutch law and Dutch courts because that may feel a bit far away from where you come from. What is good to mention is that, and what we see quite a bit, and I've seen a zillion times, is that a template contract that is used, for example, well, in Singapore, in India, and Indonesia, is used, and then just applicable laws changed from Indian law or Indonesian law to Dutch law. So that typically is like a recipe for disaster. You need to sort of make sure that it's all in line with like the provisions of Dutch law. You can't just change the applicable law without checking whether that has any other implications. So that is in a nutshell the legal ecosystem. Talking about tax climate. Sorry, this is really small, Martin. I'm sorry, but corporate income tax is the competitive tax rate of 25.8 as from 2020. There's still quite some possibilities to enter into advanced agreement with the tax authorities. There's a robust transfer pricing framework and a VAT regime allowing for cash flow optimizing. We'll get to that because that in practice is quite relevant. We have quite some R&D incentives. There's a low tax rate for net benefits from qualifying R&D activities. There are certain investment allowances for energy and environment, for example, and there's even other tax incentives for R&D activities. There's a favorable expatriate regime. We'll come to that in a second. And typically for interest and royalty withholding tax, there's no withholding tax levied on outbound payments. Let me zoom in on the VAT regime, because typically what you see is that the company sets up a hub in the EU, Netherlands, and uses that hub to distribute its products and goods throughout the European Union. Is there a question from someone? No. If you don't want to, you want to avoid the payment of custom duties and VAT during the storage or processes during the customs clearance, there's in the Netherlands this option to keep it in a bonded warehouse. So basically it's not considered imported yet. And from there you can, once it's sold, or you can transport it or import it into the EU and from there to your customers. So that gives quite some cash flow advantage. There's deferment of import VAT. That means that there's no actual payment of VAT upon importation of goods. There's some, quite some 0% VAT rates on most cross-border business-to-business supplies. And there's a reverse charge scheme. All of these rules are pretty much designed so that you don't need to sort of pre-finance your VAT when doing business. Which is quite an advantage. Imagine if you are importing goods into a hub, then you need to pay all your import duties and VAT, and only when you sell it to your customer, you're able to claim back the VAT or import duties. That creates quite some cash flow implications. Apart from VAT, I mean, the Netherlands has always been known for this, a large number of treaties. Why is treaties important? In tax treaties, which are bilateral, two jurisdictions agree on who is to levy about what part of the income. So typically, if you have, for example, a branch, an Indian company has a branch in the Netherlands, in a tax treaty it is agreed over which part of the profit which jurisdiction can levy. I mean, absence of such treaties, 9 out of 10 lead to double taxation. So the mere presence of tax treaties is a plus in itself. The other thing that you see is if you have various operational companies underneath your Dutch entity, that you'll be able to repatriate dividends and profits in a tax beneficial way to your Dutch headquarters, and under the tax treaty in a tax beneficial way from your Dutch company to your Dutch Indian headquarters. Access to talent. It was already flagged by Arnoud. Super English speaking workforce, large expat community. I'll dive into some of the practicalities and favorable expat tax regime. One of the things that is always high on the agenda is permit requirements, because if you're going to set up a company in the Netherlands and you want to bring in your own people, how does that work? Is it easy to transfer them from headquarters, and what is the requirements? Here for India, this is pretty much employees with the nationality of third countries. In principle, a work and residence permit is required and needs to be applied for. That is quite a extensive paper and paper trail intensive exercise. This is again pretty small, but what you typically see is that you apply for a high-skilled migrant regime, where you need to pay, the company needs to pay a certain salary depending on the age of the employee, and when all the applications and paperwork has been duly submitted, typically you'll get that approval within 1 to 4 months. I don't know what is the timeline at this point. Here again, very useful is the NFIA's orange carpet, right, Arnoud?
Absolutely, Barbara. I think what we advise our clients is to mostly opt for the highly skilled migrant scheme. Yeah. That's also in line when you look at the sort of companies we assist. One of the things we do is we have a close connection to the IND, and if the company is making use of a service provider like Loyens Loeff, we provide Loyens Loeff with a letter of acknowledgement, or the IND. We provide the IND with the letter of acknowledgement, basically saying, Dutch government, we are assisting this company. We know this company, so they are trustworthy. Please speed up the process. And it normally works. So depending on the busyness of the IND, which was this year a little bit off because a lot of COVID patients, and but if they're in full working order, it takes 2 to 3 months to get a permit. So which is quite quick. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so that is good. And there's always, I mean, when considering setting up and you want to bring in your own employees, it is good to bear in mind these timeframes, because it is pretty fast. But also, I mean, once you hit the ground, you want to make sure that your guys and girls are ready to rock, and that you have the appropriate permits in place. So typically you need to sort of prioritize that on your list on what needs to be done when setting up. I'm mindful of the time. I'll scroll to the expatriate regime, better known under the 30% ruling, which is for employers may pay 30% of the gross remuneration as tax-free allowance for a period up to 5 years. That is a pretty good incentive and arrangement for foreign employees landing in the Netherlands. The other thing is, if for wealthy individuals, I mean, during that 5 years, you can opt out and be treated as a non-resident for Dutch personal income tax, which means that you won't be subject to tax on your net wealth. A very favorable regime and makes Netherlands in that sense quite competitive. I mean, it used to be 10 years, but even 5 years is still pretty good. Again, mindful of the time, maybe just a quick overview is what we typically see is, well, in this particular case, Indian headquarters is set up a Netherlands platform. So most of the regional headquarter functions are operated out of the platform, from finance, marketing, sales, and then you have different operational companies underneath. Very well possible that if it's goods, it very much depends on obviously the nature of the business, but if it's goods, that they will be imported in the Netherlands in, for example, bonded warehouse, and from there shipped to the different entities throughout the region. If there's profits in the various operational companies, branches throughout the European Union and UK, those profits can be repatriated without any dividend withholding taxes. It won't be taxed at the level of the Netherlands platform because it will be exempt under the participation exemption, and upstreaming to India will be without any dividend withholding tax. So all in all, that is quite an efficient structure from a tax perspective, but from a legal perspective, it gives a robust structure. I mean, even the years to come forward, where there's lots of things moving and shaking, if appropriate headcount, and that's actually always what NFIA is looking for, what we're looking for, actual people functions in the Netherlands, this is rock solid. I'm sure there's a zillion questions because that's a lot of ground to cover in 20 minutes, but I think I sort of made it. If there's any questions, feel free. If not, I'm handing back to Rajesh.
How can that be, Barbara? There will be questions. Thank you. Thank you so much for a very lively presentation. I think we learned a lot. A few things which I wanted to ask you, and maybe Martin can also, say a few things about the double taxation treaty between Netherlands and India. Is that something which is, I heard that it is under renegotiation? Is something happening there? And the reason I ask is because you always try to compare this treaty with Singapore and Mauritius and things like this. So
well, this has been an urban myth and the buzz in the street for the longest, that it's been renegotiated. I mean, when India renegotiated its treaty with Mauritius and subsequently the Singapore treaty was aligned with the Mauritius treaty, there was mostly the buzz in Singapore that the Dutch treaty would be renegotiated soon, because I mean, at this point, the Dutch-Indian treaty is the best treaty there is. So far, not yet. As far as I know, it's still a rumor and no concrete action yet. But it's likely that at some point it will be renegotiated. But could be 2, could be 10 years. But maybe, Martin, you have more intel there.
Well, not that much. It's true that I think the rumor was also based on a discussion on tax treaties in general in the Netherlands from a couple of years ago, that the Dutch government would look into tax treaties, whether there is a lot of sufficiently anti-corruption, anti-laundering, money laundering, etc., regulations inside the tax treaty. So then at one point in time, I was still in The Hague, there was a discussion in Parliament whether all the Dutch tax treaties should be evaluated on this particular topic. And then you saw that a lot of rumors came into the market that many tax treaties would be renegotiated. In a certain point of time, I'm sure it will happen, but I agree, I don't see any concrete action yet on this topic. And of course, at this particular moment, I think Dutch policymakers have a lot of other things in their minds and on their desk, so I don't see it happen very, very soon. Maybe two other points I would like to address, and I think it was a very helpful presentation you made. Maybe one minor point about the banking account, because not so much about how to work on it, but maybe good to realize, because I get sometimes questions, it has nothing to do with being a foreigner or a foreign company or what's coming from a foreign company. It's really a policy towards everyone. Also, I was very much part of it. It's just about transparency, and banks have to comply to certain transparency regulations. So everyone, whether you're Dutch or a foreigner whatsoever, you have to comply to exactly the same regulations. So it's really there's no difference between being a foreigner or being a Dutch citizen. Only the difference can be in it's easier sometimes to find information of Dutch citizens than for foreign citizens. And the other one is, I'm sure many of you have heard about the start of the EU-India trade negotiations for a trade agreement, a trade and investment agreement. That will be a comprehensive agreement. Hopefully we can start early next year with the formal negotiations. Very difficult to tell when we will get any conclusion. Not very soon, I guess, because on the one hand, a lot of work has done already. On the other hand, a lot of work has still to be done. So negotiations will definitely take place. But if there is either an agreement or short-term conclusions or maybe agreements on special chapters, for example, an investment chapter, that also will have a positive impact, I think, on EU, India, and also on the Netherlands-India trade and investment opportunities. Thank you.
Yeah, I can endorse that, Martin, about the bank account opening. So one of your predecessors actually had a problem opening account with Rabobank in Netherlands. So can you imagine that I also had to step in? Of course, I couldn't succeed. The process was followed.
True.
But it's true. Barbara, I have a small little query from you. Which law firm do you work with in India? Because I believe they're partners and correspondents, right? So you have associations. How does it work?
We don't have associations. We're truly independent. So it very much depends on the nature of the client, and we work quite a bit with Nishita Sai, with Amersham, with the big 4 or 5 we work on a frequent basis. But so most of the time we're approached by them.
All right, great. So thank you. Yeah. I think the other point which registered on me is the tax rate, which is 25.8% is said, which is still quite good compared to many other countries. So I think it certainly makes it very attractive. So let me not take all the time, but let's open the floor to questions. I think we do have a raised hand here from Mr. Abhay Goel from Shell. I think Abhay, go in for your question.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So just 2 questions, perhaps one for Arnoud and one for Barbara. I think the question for Arnoud is, there's a lot of startups coming up in the artificial intelligence space in India, and I've been working with quite a few of them. And it just, how is it, Eindhoven, I know, and many of the universities like Tilburg and to a certain extent, Erasmus have very thriving artificial intelligence research kind of capability. Is there any, what's the kind of transaction investment things going on in that space? Because that is quite a huge space, and India is doing very well, and so is Netherlands. So that's a question for Arnoud. I think the question for Barbara was, Netherlands has this unique thing called the Netherlands Commercial Court, which is, you know, this English-speaking court in a Dutch jurisdiction, which is quite unique in the Netherlands context. And I think just maybe how has that been used in the context of cross-border investment, and how is that useful in, for example, using that as a place for arbitration is perhaps a question. So these are my 2 questions. Thank you.
So maybe Arno will go first.
Well, ladies first, right?
Okay,
Yes.
thanks. I was struggling with my. I knew you were going to say that. Struggling with my my unmute button. Yeah, it very much depends. But yeah, that international commercial court is frequently used. But what you see is that more arbitration the last couple of years has gained significantly in importance. More so because it feels more like a truly independent forum. You can pick your own experts and you can identify where you want to do the arbitration. So I guess, but I mean, to give you a more detailed answer, I should go back to my arbitration colleagues, but we've seen a shift more towards international arbitration away from that international court. Is that an answer to your question?
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Arna.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, good question, I guess, Abe. We see this in India, right? Entrepreneurial spirit, I already mentioned it. Especially companies in the field of AI, financial technologies in India, companies are popping up every day. It looks like every month there's a new unicorn in India. So absolutely an interesting field of the economy that we need to be aware of. I think there are a couple of things I can say about it. First, the definition of a startup. I think the Dutch definition is different from the Indian definition. If you look at the Netherlands, RVO, so the Ministry of Economic Affairs says startup is a company that doesn't exist longer than 5 years, has an employment volume of less than 50. If you compare that to India, India says, oh, but also most important, their product isn't being sold widely yet. If you look at the Indian definition, it is more than, I think, non-existing for 10 years, more than 100 people. And besides that, also the company needs to have a certain amount of revenue already. So there's a change in definition. For the NFIA, we work with companies that are larger than the startup phase as we have defined it in the Netherlands. So we really look at solid companies that already sell their produce in Europe. We need companies that already have enough funding to really go for a full setup. So that's the NFIA way. Besides that, in the Netherlands, we have organizations like Startup Delta, but also our colleagues from the economic departments of the embassy and the consulate generals. They work with startups, and there's a different route. So NFIA route is highly skilled migrant scheme. For startups, there is something called a startup visa. And that basically means an Indian startup moves to the Netherlands with their IP, but also basically their whole company out of India. They enter a facilitator like Yes Delft, for example. They get a coach and they get a visa for the first year. And after the first year, there will be a review to see if this company is actually going to become the new unicorn or not. So it's basically a sort of temporary deal in the Netherlands where people can make use of the ecosystem of the Netherlands. That part is not being done by the NFIA. So that's a different route, but it's definitely being used at the moment by Indian startups. I think for the NFIA, we realize that still more than 90% of the startup companies do not make it. And we focus therefore on the somewhat larger companies that have already established themselves in the market. Is that answer to your question, Abe?
Yes, quite a comprehensive answer. Thank you. Thank you all.
So I think we are running behind time, so we have to stop here. But before that, I must pass on the floor to my colleague Amit Mittal for a vote of thanks. Amit.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you so much. And thank you, Barbara, for your very insightful presentation on the legal and tax environment. I know 25 minutes is very less a time for this kind of a topic. And probably if I would have more, I would have asked you about the holding structure set up in Netherlands for international expansion, because I see most of the Indian companies doing that when they are venturing not in Europe, but I think across the globe when they do, they prefer to set up in Netherlands for some reason. So probably for another time we can keep this. And Arno, thank you so much about giving a peek in the society, the Dutch society, the warm people, and the orange carpet. Thank you, Ambassador Martin, for your presence and your opening remarks. We really appreciate in the Indo-Dutch Chamber your support, and your always availability to support these events have been wonderful. Probably we did not have this Omicron scare coming up. We would have had this event at your residence, which was the original plan, but we had to go virtual. And the good thing about this webinar, I see most of the people who logged in stayed till the end of the program. So, I mean, that was quite gripping. I would like to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Haresh Lalwani from India Netherlands Business Association, Mumbai. And Marianne from Bangalore chapter, and AVPS Chakravarti from Hyderabad. So Indo-Dutch Chambers is a bilateral business chamber for Indian and Dutch companies. And we have our corresponding arrangement with NICCT, which is in Netherlands. So I would encourage people, those who have joined in and not members, to please join in. And at the end, I would also like to thank our participants who came in and attended this seminar. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day and a lovely evening. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.